Hello, everyone, and just wanted to give you a brief overview of for test number one, which will be posted today, which is Sunday, I guess it's October the 11th at 2 p.m. Um, and just again, I think it's a good idea for me to just give you some idea of what to expect, and also to give you some additional information. Anyway, uh, the test, of course, will cover chapters 1 through 4. It is very important that you review chapters 1 through 4, everything that we covered in class, so on the videos and in the book, before you take the test. The test is, you'll have 75 minutes to complete it. There are 17 questions altogether. The first 16 of them are multiple choice, worth 6 points apiece. So that's 96 points right there. The last question, number 17, is 14 points, and it will be 2 fill-in-the-blanks questions, worth 7 points each. So it's 110 points. There's 10 extra credit points on the test. And I've made the test to be a little bit, I would say, moderately difficult, because, of course, you have an open book. I'm not putting any restrictions on how to take the test, except I do not want you to use anybody else's help while taking the test. You need to be taking it on your own. Make sure that when you take the test, whenever you take it over the next few days, and it is due on Thursday by our 7:45 p.m. class. So on Thursday the 15th, it's due at 7:45. So make sure that when you take it, a couple things, that you will be undisturbed for 75 minutes. That's number one. Number two, make sure your Wi-Fi is working well at that time. If it's unstable, then you're probably not a good idea to take it at that time. Therefore, you probably don't want to wait to the last minute to take this test. But you also want to make sure that you're prepared. So make sure that, again, the Wi-Fi is working well and you're undisturbed for 75 minutes, because once you start, the test will continue no matter what happens. So make sure if your family's taken care of, the dog and cat is taken care of, and you can be left alone for those 75 minutes. Anyway, as far as the test itself is concerned, I did cover all the material, much of the material that we covered in class. I mean, obviously, I can't cover everything, but I want to go over what you need to know, and then I want to spend a little time on a topic that is on the test, but I don't believe I spent enough time on it in class. So I'm going to spend a little bit more time on that topic. So obviously, you'll know that topic's on the test. From chapter one, I'm just going to read from the textbook here. From chapter one, what do you need to know from chapter one? Well, you need obviously to know all the definitions, because that's required. I would spend some time on let's see. Oh, yes, on the difference between a sample and a population. Now, I'm not going to ask you, a question like, what is a sample? What is a population? I'm going to give you a scenario. I'm going to give you a survey, a sample type survey, and ask you questions about, I could ask you questions about the sample and population, anything about that. So just make sure you understand the difference between a sample and a population. Also, know the difference between a sample statistic and a population parameter. Make sure you understand that difference between those two. Also, in chapter one, the scales of measurement. There are, qualitative variables. There are the scales of measurement that are mentioned here: nominal, ordinal, interval, ratio. Make sure you understand all of that going into the test. And then chapter two, obviously, much of chapter two we covered. Obviously, the frequency distribution and histogram is an important part of this. To know how a histogram is formed. Now, I'm not going to ask you to create any graphs during the test. I'm going to give you graphs and ask you questions about them. It could be calculation questions. It could be interpretation questions. But basically, the types of graphs obviously would be the histogram and its associated frequency distributions. Also, stem and leaf could be a possibility. Dot plot could be a possibility. Bar chart could be a possibility. Line graph, we didn't cover that because of the problem that the Mac users were having in creating one. So that's not covered on this test or at all during the course. So don't worry about the line graph, but the bar chart obviously is covered. A pie chart is a possibility too. And then the scatter plot, which is on page 37, we're covering that at a later topic towards the end of the course, so don't worry about that. We didn't cover it. And also the tabulation charts that we created. The simple tabulation, the cross tabulation, and also the tabulation that has particular statistics like the count and the mean and the standard deviation, things like that. So I do want to actually share my screen with you and show you an example of what you do need to know a little bit about cross tabulation, right? So let's see, I think it's right here. All right, now this is an example of a cross tabulation which has statistics as part of it. So remember, cross tabulation, there's two variables. There's the variables running along the rows, in this case, some age category, okay? And then along the columns is another variable, in this case, gender, okay? So there's gender, maybe one is male and two is female. And then the age categories, there's 3 age categories that are mentioned here, all right? Now, if you look at the bottom of the chart, it tells you in each cell. Now, what is a cell? It's one of these intersections of the row and the column. Okay, so this is cell. If we were going to say what cell this is cell 1, 1, row 1, 1, and this is cell row 1, 2. But if these had names to them, obviously we would talk about the names of these cells. Now, these cells are categories. These are categories. These aren't numeric, even though they are represented by numbers here. I could easily replace these with some categorical names. You know, I could put male here for 1 and female for 2, and then I could put maybe age categories here. So we have cells. In this case, we have 6 cells that are intersections of rows and categories. And then we have these cells that deal with these marginal totals, marginal totals. So this would be for row 1. For this age category 1, we have our totals. For 2, we have our totals. For 3, we have our totals. And the same thing for the columns. There's 2 columns in the totals. Now, bottom of the here tells us what is in each cell. So the first number is the mean. The second number is the standard deviation. And the third number is the count. The count would be the total number of people in the survey that meet the criteria of being in row 1 and column 1, all right? To be, let's say, male, and to have this age category. And the same thing for each one of these 6 that are listed here. And then for the totals, we also have the mean, standard deviation, and the count for the totals. Now, this one here is the grand total. Because it's the total of the totals, right? It's the total for the 3 rows, and it's a total for the 3 columns. So this is the grand total cell. All right. Now, with this particular, and this is what I want to tell you, that with this arrangement here, I can ask you a whole number of questions pertaining to one of these cells or pertaining to a marginal total. But basically, anything that has any calculation that with regards to the mean And the standard deviation I can ask you questions about. So for example, in chapter 3, we of course we discussed the mean, the median, and the mode, and the standard deviation, and the interquartile range, and the quartiles, and all of that. But also in chapter 3, if you go towards the back, chapter 3, there's information. Let's see if I'm not sure it's in chapter 3 before I tell you. So just hold on one second. Oh yes, there's the empirical rule, and there is Chebyshev's theorem. So Chebyshev's theorem and the empirical rule use means and standard deviations. So anything about Chebyshev or the empirical rule, I can ask a question regarding any of these cells here, because they all have a mean and standard deviation. Now, I can also ask you questions about standardizing data. So for example, if I say, let's look at row 2, column 1, okay, this column here, and let's say the person's age is 40, okay, in this column here, what is its standardized score, or z-score? Well, you would take the 40 and subtract the mean and divide by the standard deviation, okay? So again, you have enough information to ask all sorts of questions whenever you have a mean and standard deviation. So just read the question carefully, know which of these cells I'm talking about, because again, I may not be putting 1 and 2 and 1, 2, 3 here. I might actually put the actual descriptions of these categories, because that's what they are. 1, 2, and 3 are the categories for age, and 1 and 2 up here are the categories for gender. Okay, so again, I just wanted to bring this to your attention because this could show up on your test. And again, I could ask you all sorts of questions regarding anything that deals with the mean and standard deviation. Now, one other thing I do want to bring to your attention is what if, for example, I wanted to know the mean for the columns 1 plus 2. In other words, let's say for these 2 cells here, all right, columns 1 and 2 for row 1. I want to know what is the mean for these 2. Now I have a mean for this cell, and I have a mean for this cell. How do I find the mean for both cells together? Well, the formula for a mean is the sum of all of the values, all right? The sum of those values. In this case, let's say for the cell here, there's 7 values, 7 ages. It would be the sum of those ages divided by 7. There's 7 ages in this cell. So, and then for this cell, it would be the sum of all the ages divided by 10, because there's 10 ages in this one. So how do I find the mean for both of these cells together? Well, the way to do it is, because the mean is the sum of all the ages divided by the number of ages that are listed in that cell, which is in this case 7, in this case 10, I would multiply the mean by the number of ages. When I multiply the mean times the number of ages, what I'm going to be left with is the sum of the ages. So I do that with this cell, and I do it with this cell. In other words, I multiply 39.27 times 7. I multiply 37.41 times 10. And then I get the sum of the ages for this cell. I get the sum of the ages for this cell, and I can simply add those up. Add the sums up for both this cell and this cell. And then what do I divide by? Well, now I have 17. 7 plus 10 is 17, is the number of ages in these 2 cells, So again, I multiply these 2, 39.27 times 7, 37.41 times 10. I add up those sums, and I divide by the sum of 7 plus 10, which is 17. And that'll give me the mean for the sum of these two cells together. All right. So hopefully that makes sense. If you sit down with a piece of paper, I'm sure algebraically you would understand that the mean times the total number of values in that cell would be the total ages in that cell, period. That's what it is. So that's how you do that. All right, I just want to bring that to your attention. Obviously, if those of you who are mathematically inclined probably be able to figure it out without me telling you. But if it wasn't obvious to you, now hopefully it is. All right, and that's how you answer a question like that. All right, so that's it. I'll stop sharing. And let me just talk about chapter 3. Chapter 3 has a lot in it, obviously. I could test almost anything in here. Chapter 3. Chapter 3, of course, has the measures of central tendency, which are the mean. There's obviously something about a weighted mean in here, but the median and the mode. And what else is in here? The types of distributions, which you obviously need to know, which would be the bell-shaped curve, left skewed and right skewed. Make sure you know the difference between them. And in the book, they talk about positively skewed versus negatively skewed, but know that skewness to the right is positively skewed, skewness to the left is negatively skewed. All right. Notice and note, remember in Manytab, there's an actual statistic called skewness, which if it's positive means positive skewness, and if it's negative, it means negative skewness. And the bigger the number, the more skewed it is, obviously. So just make sure you know that. Also, measures of dispersion or the range, right? Make sure you know how to calculate the range. You should be familiar with the quartiles. You know, the first quartile, the lower quartile, the upper quartile, which is the third quartile, the median. Know about it breaking everything into 4 equal pieces, basically quarters of the data. I explained that in class. Mean absolute deviation is something that is in the book. It's possibly on the test. Variance and standard deviation, make sure you understand that. Make sure that you understand that the variance and standard deviation formulas, the denominator of the variance formula for a sample is n-1, and for a population, it's just n. Make sure you understand that. And then the standard deviation is the square root of the variance. So the standard deviation is the square root of the variance. So make sure you have the correct variance formula that you're using. Remember, Manytab, when it gives you a variance and standard deviation, it's typically for a sample, not for a population. So if I ask you for a variance or standard deviation for population, you have to adjust it to make sure that you get the proper answer. All right. And then the box and whisker plot, make sure you understand how that works with outliers. And Chebyshev's theorem, empirical rule, obviously you need to know that. And all of the various charts that are in chapter 2, many of them, we can also use chapter 3. I could ask you chapter 3 information. I can give you, for example, I can give you a stem and leaf and ask you questions about that. What is the mean? What is the variance, standard deviation? What's the mode, right? I can ask you questions like that. So make sure you do understand how you can apply those to any of the, and also one thing that you need to know, and it's important, are the abbreviations that are used in the book. For example, the coefficient of variation, page 82, very good thing to know for this test, giving you a little bit of a hint. And it's abbreviated CV. So make sure when you see CV on a quiz or a test, it's referring to the coefficient of variation. So make sure you know how to calculate that. IQR is the interquartile range. I could say IQR and know that it means the interquartile range, which is Q3 minus Q1. Okay. So make sure that if there's anything in here that has abbreviations, that you know it. I mean, the mean absolute deviation, MAD, M-A-D, right? Make sure you know that. Um, and then of course the quartiles, right? For the third quartile, we use Q3. For the first quartile, Q1. The median it could say medium, or it could be Q2. Q2 is the median. That's one possibility too. So just be familiar with those abbreviations so that when they come up, you're not, shocked by it or anything. You should know. And again, see if there's anything else in here that you need to know. And I think that's it. So I'm going to post this very soon, and then you'll have an opportunity to take the test. So make sure, I did tell, we'll send an email, obviously by the time you see it, you've seen the email. But obviously, take your time and review the material in your book and your notes and anything that we did in class. Oh, and one other thing that you need to know for this test, it's important. It's more partly extra credit, maybe not, but make sure you understand for a histogram. I gave you a histogram, how to calculate the estimated mean and estimated standard deviation. Go over that before you take the test. Again, it's sort of extra credit. Part of it is and part of it is, but just make sure you're familiar with how to calculate that. A calculator is absolutely essential. It doesn't have to be a graphing calculator, but you need a calculator that you can depend on. That not just the simplest one, but the one that scientific calculator at least, that does squares and square roots and things like that. Make sure you have that calculator all ready to go. Obviously, you have Excel available. You'll have Minitab available too if you need to make any calculations. All right, and then on my T-shirt here, I got this from NASA many years ago, and you can't, if you read backwards, you can't read it forwards, but it says B greater than, and this is the formula for average. Remember, I talked about the mean. This is the formula for the mean, backwards. But it's 1 over n divided by the sum of x. This is what I was talking about before. So for this test, B greater than average, and hopefully you all do very, very well in the test. And remember, even though it's 110 points, an 86 and above is an A. So don't stress over your score, or just do the best that you can. Don't spend too much time on any particular problem. I purposely left the question regarding the mean and standard deviation of histogram towards the end of the test so that you don't get stuck on that near the beginning. So, but if any question, you can't figure it out, and you're spending too much time on it, just guess and move on. All right, it's multiple choice. All right, so anyway, take care and good luck on the test, and see you on Tuesday, which is, I guess, the 13th, all right, at 8:30. All right. Okay, take care and good luck on everything.